Hi, my name's Sharon. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi.
Sharron F now. I started with my maiden name, Sharron M, to Sharron B, to Sharron C. Now I'm Sharron F. But I gotta tell you, I got sober on August 20th, 1975. So I've had a little bit of life in there. So it's not, I just didn't change partners like the song says. So anyway, it's really good to be here. And thank you, Lisa. It's good meeting you and get caught up. Yeah, I remember you from, gosh, a long time ago when we talked. And Kiki, I guess I haven't met you yet, but thank you for your help. And of course, Kent, thank you. Where is Mr. Kent? He's somewhere. Ah, he's got a front row seat. Okay. Thank you for everything. And thank you, Debbie, for being a partner, 25 years almost. So that's a record in AA, I know, but I tried. It wasn't my fault, we all like to say that. But it's really good to be here. And we've had, Pete and I left home a couple days ago. And we've been having a road trip. Now, it's been forever since I've had a road trip. Back in the day, it was like maybe my thumb would give me a road trip, or maybe we had a car that we paid $50 for and named it. You got to name those cars, then they last longer. And then the road trip was about as far as the car would go. But yeah, I haven't run in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is huge for me because I have a thirst. Alcohol quieted the voices in my head and the anxiousness and oh, what am I going to do? And where am I? I'm in Iowa and this isn't fair. And it was my first resentment at 6 when I realized where I was. And then I looked for the mothership and it didn't come back and get me. So I was a little disappointed, but I had a great family. Nobody there, everybody was supporting. We could talk about emotions. I had 2 sisters and a brother and a beautiful mom and a great dad. And it just never was enough for me. And I didn't know why, because my dad was Czech. We had a nice community and a lot of fun. And, we would share vegetables when the gardens would grow. And we knew that was from Lizzie because that's her basket. So then we'd fill it with our vegetables and take it back. It was community. And I understand community because we shared a lot. We cared for each other. Yeah, there was gossip and, drama and stuff like that too. But it's kind of like AA, we're a community. We take care of each other. We know about each other. We don't just sit back and let you, have your suffering. We can, it's timing, yes, but you can let people know, hey, I'm here to help. Or we know something's going on and we can fix it with somebody else's help, or we can sit with you and just listen. Just hold your hand and listen. So that to me is a community of love. And I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love my life. I love that I have a life because I started drinking at 12 and I had the thirst. I had the thirst. I had the moment. I had this is it moment. So from that on, I was able to get alcoholic and water. My dad had a big bar because he had a business, and I saw him drunk once. My sister's wedding reception, and I guess I was drunk sitting on his lap and we were making up. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Dad. And nobody remembers it because believe me, I had to make a lot of amends back. But everybody was like, oh God, then maybe they're talking, right? Maybe father and daughter are talking. But no, it was, I broke my dad's heart. King Alcohol asked for a lot in my life. And I gave it. I gave it. And it's not that in my later years of drinking, it's not that I wanted to, it's I had to, because I was not one that wanted to stop drinking. I didn't think of it. That was my fuel, and that was my courage, and that was my I don't care, and that was my running buddy. Eventually, that's what it came down to, was me and King Alcohol. So, I went off to college like you do, and I got through high school fine, but college was it was different. And I had a fake ID and I started bar drinking. And pretty soon it was like that my family began to notice what's going on with her. And they sent me to a therapist. They sent me to the local doctor, and he gave me Valium. And I hated being on that stuff. and drinking, because you just drool on the bar. That's not my style. So things, I just didn't really want any help. What's wrong? And then my dad asked me one time, what's wrong with you? Too many times. Did you hear what's wrong with you? They used to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'd make things up. And they thought, well, I thought you wanted to do that. No, changed my mind. So I told my dad what was wrong with me when he came down to college with grandma's soup, her homemade soup and everything. She thought I was looking a little funny. So she set her soup with my dad and he came down and I told my dad, you want to know what's wrong with me, Dad? Because my father could fix anybody in the community, any of the other relatives, anybody in the city, anybody in the town. If they came to my dad was that kind of guy. And I'd see him sitting at the table, having a cup of coffee with them, maybe pouring them a drink. And they would, sometimes they would work things out. And that was my dad. And I knew my dad couldn't help me because I knew whatever I had, he couldn't help me. I didn't know alcoholism. There was none in the family that I could remember or anybody knows until recently. But there I was with my dad and he said, what's wrong with you? And I said, you want to know, Dad? I'll tell you what's wrong. And I told my dad about a situation in a fraternity house where I couldn't get out. Now that sealed the deal. My dad didn't look at me for 8 years in the eye because there was too much innocence lost between us. Now, it wasn't like he kicked me out of the house, but it was just like, if he was sitting at the table having breakfast, I wouldn't go sit at the table and have breakfast. If we were driving to somebody's house for, or one of the relatives for the holidays, I would ride in another car. And it was just too painful for the two of us to even look at each other for 8 years. And Alcoholics Anonymous gave me a way to heal that for him. And so that was my dad. I had to slide across the bar, the love of my dad. I had to slide across the bar in New York City, my art talent. I went back to art school after I burned out in New York and I couldn't paint anymore. It doesn't matter. They got some photos and they got some pictures and they got whatever they need. They've got it. So I don't care. And then I ended up in Colorado and this is my story. I kept moving, looking for something, and I always brought me with me and eventually I'd show up and go, oh, it's not here either. And I don't know what I was looking for, a spiritual awakening. I think I had that thirst for a God and a spiritual awakening inside that I couldn't get to. And I had a lot of love for God when I was a little girl because I knew God was love. I knew God was love. And I think I was, 18 years coming out of the confessional once, and I made the priest so mad. He started screaming at me and I was screaming at him, and we came out of the confessional screaming at each other. So all these people in line that were getting, going to confession were like, oh my God, what did she do? It's like, and I walked up, it was actually a church like this. And I walked up and he was looking at me, I was looking at him, I gave him a 1-finger peace sign. And that was it. That kind of sealed the deal about me and God for a long time. And I knew God was there, but you just stay way over there and I don't need you and don't come into my life. So King Alcohol allowed me to slide God over with both hands and part of my heart. And it's just the way it was. And I kept running and I met Bob Dylan. I think it was Bob Dylan. I came to California. I met him in Aspen and that was my, I don't know for sure, but sang like him, looked like him. It was a good time, 3 days of fun. And then I ended up in Laguna Beach and I got a little job and I had to get out of there too. I didn't feel like it was my place. And I ended up in a commune and somewhere in Orange County and I drank their bong wine one night because I didn't have enough, because we panhandle for a living. It was like, what? I don't ask people for money. What's wrong with you? So I would go up to the Bank of America building and the Krishnas were up there having their fun and making music. And so they would pick me up in, 4 hours and say, hey, how much did you get? And I give them 50 cents. They say, what's wrong with you? I'd say, what's wrong with you? I have a good time here, and I liked some of that energy. I liked the spiritual energy, but they always wanted something more. They always wanted money or give up your name and, leave everybody and leave everything. And no, not doing it. But I was searching already. And so that didn't work out with those people. They were really mad at me. I guess the bong wine was important, so they took me on a picnic and left me on a mountain. They said, bring your things. And I wasn't very sharp that day, right? I think I would have maybe understood something, bring my things. We're going on a picnic, what? Okay, so I end up back at home and I have gallbladder that is just, I'm dying sick. That eventually just was taken out. And I had pancreatitis and I was sick and I went to the local bars, judging everybody in the local bars every night for being in there. I knew you'd end up in here every night, Billy Lang, right? And I'm in there every night and I am sick and I am not having a very good time. And I remember one night, and I was the thing that lived upstairs. My mom said, you could stay here with Dad, your dad's way, because you break his heart. Now, you don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that, Mom. My mother was just, we were so tight. And now she's beginning to understand something's wrong with me. And one night I was sitting in the trunk of her car with the bottle after the bars closed and petting my dog that had been hit by a car or something. Couldn't find my dog. And then I found her in the snow and it was cold and I didn't know what to do with her because you couldn't bury her. And I put her in a army blanket in the trunk. My mom always was ready for an accident. She has an army blanket, first aid kit and all that. So I wrapped this dog in the army blanket and I was drunk petting my dead dog in the trunk because my mother heard the garage door go up and didn't hear it go back down. And so she came out and saw me crying with a bottle in my hand, petting a dead dog. And, she was kind of mortified and hurt. And we did bury the dog, I remember. But that's where I was. This is the little girl. I played lots of musical instruments. I could dance. I could tap dance. I was such a good tap dancer. They put me in with the older kids to do this show. And then I heard the older kids say, what's she doing here? Right? So I didn't want to do it. And alcohol gave me the courage to not care about stuff like that. So my mother and I, she was worried about me and I met somebody that she actually knew the family and he said, let me take care of you. And then this is how I ended up at an organic farm in northern Wisconsin. Cold. We had chopped wood. We had if you want a tea on the wood stove, you had to put the wood in there. So you had to go in the basement and use that big axe. I got pretty good at it. A couple of times I missed my toe when I was drunk. I was like, yeah, good. I missed my toe. And we made maple syrup and they were pouring the maple syrup and they poured it and they were a little loose with it. And it came on my hands. And I had gloves on, but I had red Mother Earth nose, which was a good thing that would come I read it. And they said to put your hands in the snow. And I did. I tore off the gloves and put my hands in the snow and I was okay. But this is like, there's 8 farms. We're all living on the edge. No one's trying to pay taxes. Everybody's trying to get over, right? And they had hootenannies and they didn't drink like me. They didn't drink like me. And I stood out. And then, good old Phil would, try to play that banjo and I kick it when I'm drunk. I got some cheap wine because I painted mailboxes. That was the money I did. And we had the 50 head of sheep and organic. And I kick his banjo and I'd take Pete Seeger and throw him across the room and put on the Stones and tell him all what I thought about him. And they'd have hootenannies and I'd disrupt them. And they'd make me sit in the corner and play the spoons. Because when you're mad, you can really play the spoons really loud and good. And so they left to do primal therapy and I was done. Just so you know, girls, I let everything grow, hair, everything. And so in the spring, when the wind blew through my legs, I thought there were ants. And I looked at myself and I put my arms in the air and then something else I went, oh my God, what is wrong with you? This is not, I want to live. So I harvested my Maui Wowie. That was my organic. And I went into a college town, and I had it ready to go. And I had something set up that I was just going to make a deal, get some money. They're doing primal therapy. Goodbye. I'm going to be gone by the time you guys get home. I'll scream at the sheep and get drunk. And I was happy. So I ended up, with this big deal with the guys, and they said, well, where is it? And I went, oh, I forgot it back at the farm, And so I walked across the street. There was a carnival there and I got a job. I went shop for shop with tequila with Matt Armstrong. Matt Armstrong shows from Silva, Louisiana. And he said, all right, girl, but you got to have a trailer hitch on your car. Everything hinged my whole resume. And I did. So I got a shooting gallery. That was my joint. And I ended up working in the carnival. And I called my mother from Arkansas and she said, you're not with Phil. You're not on that farm. You're not going to make a life with him. I said, Mother, I never even liked him. And then I said, no, I'm with the carnival now. And she said, you're what? And she started to cry. And I had to slide across the bar, the love of my mom. I can't crawl home anymore. And that's just the way life went. And so that was a crazy time. It was crazy, crazy. And I lost my humanity, had to slide my humanity across the bar because we were takers. I just hung with the people. If I want to fit in, I got to learn how to talk that see as Arnie, and I learned how to talk that talk, and I learned how to take, and I learned how to not care, and I learned how to mace people. And if they, the little boys wanted their teddy bears, I just bought those teddy bears. And so their dads would come and be mad, and I would just have to, I always had mace in my one boot, I'd have to mace the dads. And that's what you have standing here, somebody who lost her humanity, who couldn't even give a teddy bear to a 12-year-old boy who shot down the right targets in my shooting gallery. And eventually I caused enough problems that we would get closed down, but they would close down the show. We'd have to leave town. And Mr. Armstrong got very upset with that little Wisconsin girl. And eventually he hit his state. And then he knew that I was bartering with some of those other things. And, we drank till 4 and 5 in the morning, and then we would go and, sleep, and then we would start the day. And I remember being in those cheap motels where the air conditioner just goes drip, drip, drip. And I'd look out and, oh, is it morning? Is it night? What's happening? And one morning, Mr. Armstrong had called Washington Parish Finest. And so they came charging through the door. They knew where everything was. They found it. They handcuffed me. They took me off to jail. And the carnival went bye-bye. I thought they didn't come back and give me any cigarettes or anything. That's not fair, but they were happy to get rid of me. And that was how I ended up, after that situation, I ended up in New Orleans. But there's a day it was crazy. I had DTs for the first time until I found somebody making something. And I'd never had DTs before because I always had something. I always had fresh alcohol, always in my backpack somewhere else. I was, stealing it from people. I always had it. And now I'm having DTs, and I'm unwashed. I took 37 days I was in there, and I took one shower because it was scary in there. And so I didn't ever take a shower, and I had cuts all over me because I had a Coke bottle, and that's what the DTs told me to do, cut yourself. And so I was cutting myself, and they came in and they said, we're taking you somewhere. And I thought, oh, this is it. They told me they shot my dog. I'm next. So that's how I was living. Oh, I guess I'm next. And I did find my dog, but they took me to this building, and they threw me in there, and there were 3 people standing there with suits on, and it was a bail bondsman, a lawyer, and a judge. And so kangaroo court was in session. And I sat down and began to sit in a chair. I looked over, and there was my father. If everything in my life crumbles and I can't hear anything, and I have all those commitments, so I sponsor all these girls, and it's going to happen, and I can't go on anymore. I hope I remember that day how I felt. I felt like a piece of scum on the bottom of your shoe. I looked at my dad. My dad didn't look at me. He was sitting in a chair, and I slid to the floor. And nobody talked. And my dad wrote a check to try to get me out of this. And then they sent me back to jail. They didn't let me go right away. But I wanted to say to him, I'm so tired, Dad, can I go home? But my ego, fed by King Alcohol, wouldn't let me. I had 1,000 excuses why I couldn't say that, why I couldn't surrender. If we're sitting here tonight, we've had a moment of grace, which is surrender, a moment of grace, which is surrender, which, when I'm in pain, I know grace is coming, and I know the surrender is coming, because that is always that way in Alcoholics Anonymous. Since I've been sober, if I'm in pain, I know that if I surrender, the pain, the grace is coming, and then I have to surrender, because we get that here. We have the me too. Oh, you too. We have that connection. We have, oh, I did that too. Or, oh, I'm so glad to see the light come on in your eyes. We have so much here. And the joy of it is that not everybody gets to sit in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's alcoholic. There's millions that are dying. It's a huge disease that tells us we don't have it, and it kills people. I've known a lot, and if you have any time at all, you know people that just can't make it. And it breaks your heart, but then you see the light come on in somebody's eyes, and it's like, okay, yeah. And I think they say that 10 people's lives get better the minute you walk into Alcoholics Anonymous and sit down, whether you know that their lives are better or not, but that's just the start of it. And this is a beautiful, action-based healing program that allows you to have a new life. I didn't want a new life. Anyway, I ended up in New Orleans, and that was crazy. And we all drank a lot, and we all just died a lot, and we all did things that were nuts. And I got tired of bartending, and I just stopped. And I know it's a long story in New Orleans, but I'm not going to go into it because it's a lot of just drinking and sadness and crazy and blackouts. And my friend Michael was killed on Mardi Gras Day outside my door, and I wouldn't let anybody come in. I mean, of course, the police were called, and people hit the ground, and I closed the door and I said, I'm taking a bath. Clueless to life. And I had a friend that was on the force, and he came, and I opened the door for him. They took me downtown, and they put me in a place until they could talk to me because I was so drunk and crazy. It was Mardi Gras Day. And now my friend just got shot, and I'm sitting there in a metal chair that's bolted to the floor. And I wanted to, there was a window, and I wanted to run through the window with that chair and just fall into a Mardi Gras float, die. I thought that'd be good, but I couldn't get the chair up. And my friend says, Sharron, you got to leave town, or, you're going to, because if you're prior, they're going to send you to Angola prison, which is not a place to go in Louisiana. So I left town, I went to New York. I drank my way through my sister's life. I drank my way through people's lives, and I ended up back in California. I'm going to walk to Hawaii. That was my best plan. Now, I'm a good swimmer, but I don't think I would have made it. So I thought that might work. And I ended up at Barney's Beanery, and it's April of 75. Somebody else's woo-woo bar, Barney's. Yeah, thank you. You're the commitment girl, right? Yeah. Barney's just has them coming out of there. Just great. We're in this, yeah, even the owner got sober, but crazy place. And I ended up with a backpack, book Be Here Now by who was then Baba Ram Das. Some clothing, no dog, no boyfriend, no car, no job. And I had a dirty red dashiki on most of the time, and I was homeless, and I couldn't get a job. And people in Barney's were nice to me. And one night, this girl they'd buy me drinks. They'd buy me drinks. And I wasn't too much trouble anymore because I didn't have any energy left. I just kind of sat and listened and whatever. And this girl was laying next to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, pretty passed out. And so people were, I guess, signing a court card like you're going to do. I think they're passing it down, and, because she was going to go off to a meeting, she had to have her court card signed, I guess. I don't know. Looking back on it, that's what was happening. So she falls into a taxi. I took my Jose Cuervo Gold in a nice big rock glass, nice and neat. And I put my hand up like everybody else and go for you, Chris, go to A&A, and she fell into a cab, and she was going to be my Eskimo to you. Barney's Beanery got me sober. I got sober from a bar, and I don't really remember a lot of that time. And people were nice to me and let me sleep on floors. And then I don't know, I went back to New Orleans. It didn't work out. I came back to California, and I ended up in Barney's on a motorcycle going to Palm Springs to have a good time. And that good time ended up with my good friend leaving me in a car with people we didn't know. And they got fresh with her, and she got out and drove away. They drove away with me, and I was a victim of violent crime, and a lot of things happened. And I woke up in a ditch. July 27th, 1975. And my mom hadn't heard from me in a long time. I stopped calling home. I remember she sent me a Valentine's gift in one of the bars in New Orleans, because she always sent me a Valentine's gift, and she knew if I got it, I'd have to call home. And that's the way it was with my mother, who I love with my whole heart. So I heard a voice. It's hot. I'm laying here. I'm hurting. I have a concussion, broken bones. And I hear this voice that says, get up, I want to live. Now, if I could have turned around and saw who said that, I probably could have, but I couldn't. I couldn't even move. But somehow, some way, somebody found me. I ended up in a gurney. I ended up in the hospital for, I don't know, 2 weeks. And they gave me morphine. I had a detective. It was a whole big thing. And I was laying on the gurney when they were putting my jaw back together. I'm Jane Doe. I don't have any idea. I write my mother's phone number down on a piece of paper, and they called my mom to tell her what happened to her beautiful daughter. And they didn't tell her what hospital I was in. They knew it was California. My sister and my mother called hospitals for 2 days before they found, but I'm not hurting anyone but me, Mom. Leave me alone. Come on, right? Then we might as well just say, stand back and watch me die. That's the disease of alcoholism. It lies to me. It lies to me. Like they don't care. Oh my God, they were dying. They don't care. So after I was in this hospital, this man shows up and I'm getting released that day and I had nowhere to go. Well, he was dating the girl in the bar with the big book. And she said, that girl has nowhere to go. Go get her. I just know somebody's showing up. They're being nice to me. We have a place for you to stay. And he drove all the way to Palm Springs, drove me all the way back to the Duck Pond liquor store because he lived upstairs. I thought, okay, well, we can do that. Because he would buy me cheap wine and I would put a straw through the place where the tooth was kicked out. And I have a beautiful dentist, Ken. When I met him, he said, I'm going to give you a beautiful smile. And he did. He did. And I know you do too. But I was wired up for 3 months in AA and I couldn't talk. He goes, I talked like this, it was, I wasn't reading anything. But that's the way I was. So I was up there with him and I do this cheap wine and I just sit there and then I go pass out. And then he do it the next day and I had a concussion. I was so out of it. And on August 20th, my sobriety date, Grace stepped in big time, big time. It was really a small miracle because he said to me, you have to leave, you're depressing me. I was like, oh my God, I have nowhere to go, nowhere to go. So I called my mom, collect. That's what we do. And she answered the phone and she said, for the first time in her life, she told me, Sharron, we can't help you anymore. She said no. She'd never said no. When I called, go to the Salvation Army. And it was like, it was the end. I didn't know what to do. And that number was sitting there. And it was the girl, Chris, in the bar with the big book, dating the guy who came to get me and let me sleep on his couch. And I called her and she said, oh, I can't come get you today, but I know you need to go. But I'm going to have 2 girls come get you, And I ended up sitting on the steps of this liquor store. Actually, she had me call a stranger and I called a woman named Suzanne who was married to a guy named Cubby. And that was my first time she just hears, she heard the story. So nobody could understand me because I talked like this, right? But she got it, right? And she knew. She told me where to sit. She said, put your drink down, put your joint down too. And I went, how does she know I'm working both here? It got my attention and she knew where to tell me to sit. So I sat there on those steps and this car pulls up because I just need a place to stay. I have nothing. And they're so bright, and they're so cheery, and they're so bubbly. And I went, no. In my head, I said, no, I don't like them. And they picked me up. They picked up this broken child of God and put him in the back seat where I couldn't get out of this Volkswagen. And they talked incessantly about themselves all the way to wherever they went. And I had this in my pocket. I had this. I don't know. It was a clipping from the Palm Springs paper about me. Irene, my Irene had, she went and found that article for me, and it was like all that happened to me. It was a whole. I hadn't been through that. It just got me here. That's what I thought. Just got me here. Yeah, there were a lot of repercussions physically I had to go through and some other things. I just thought it just got me here. It was my vehicle to get here. No, it was traumatic. I didn't feel that until I met my man. I didn't feel it until I met Pete, where I felt so safe with him that I could tell him everything. And that's what I was, 48 years sober. It took that long to face that. So the work is never done. I know that. That's for sure. But so they take me to this church. We go up this, and I thought, okay, church. And I'm walking up the stairs. The guy at the suit, much like your leader, puts his hand out and he said, welcome. I can't talk. I don't look up, really. I am broken and bruised, and I'm in clothes that are torn. And this is a little girl who I went to 4-H. I was a campfire girl. I mean, I knew how to dress right. I knew how to take care of myself, and I knew how to help others with all of that. I was very good at that as a little girl. I could dress you, I could find your closet and make you look great. And now this is me. I'm somebody that's sitting on a corner, but you said welcome. And I sat down, and I don't know, the man at the podium hooked me. He had what I needed that night to keep me here. He said he always waited for the spaceship to land and say, you can come home now, Bill. And I thought, I'm with my spaceship people. You all looked a little spaceshipy to me, and it made me sit a little deeper in the seat. And the joy of all of this was he hooked me. He got my attention. And then somebody named Chuck Nesbitt, God bless him, came by and he said, take your pack off, kid. You look tired. And he invited me to stay for 30 days. And then he came back and he said, no, you look really tired. And he invited me for longer. I don't remember what it was, but I thought, well, that was nice. I don't know I'm at AA yet. I just know these people are being kind to me. Kindness kept me here. And so then this guy puts this book down in front of me. His name was Maurice Solitow. Oh my God. I mean, Debbie knows a lot of these names, and I'm sure you do, Kent, and some others. And he put this book down, Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was a second edition. By the way, I had a big resentment about Dr. Paul because my sponsor, 2 years of sobriety after the third edition was out, and I was having trouble letting go of something and a resentment. She said, go read page 449 and tell me about it. So I read page 449 in the second edition. If you go look, it's called Joe's Wounds. So I didn't say anything for 2 years. And then I saw a third edition. I went, I thought it was too stupid for AA. I wasn't going to tip my hand to her that I don't get this thing about the dollar in the pocket and, how his wife didn't give him any money and he was in the nut house. And how is that acceptance? But I didn't say anything. So ask questions. It's really okay. I know. So my friend, my girl I sponsor, Hilda, every year has a Joe's Woes meeting just for me. You got to laugh at so much of it. Yeah, and then we got to take these steps seriously because I need to make amends. I need to get going. I need to look at my defects because and thank God I had good sponsorship. And thank God, I started on floors. I got a borrowed sleeping bag. My mother sent me a blender. She knew where I was. And I would call home when I couldn't go to the first Christmas at my grandma's. And my brother said he'd listen because all the aunts would come around my mom at the phone at grandma's house when I would call my mom and wish her, happy Thanksgiving or whatever it was. And then she would get off the phone. He said she always got off the phone and said, how's Sharon doing? I didn't even know they knew all those relatives. We don't think that people care. And she said, well, how's Sharon doing? Well, she said, hey. Because she knew it was anonymous, but that was all she knew about it, really. So that's why she would whisper it. So, God bless her. She got to come out for a couple of my parties and in the Pacific group. It got to be, it was sweet to see Johnny Harris and Clancy genuflect in front of her almost because they loved my mother and they would always sit with her and tell, don't tell that joke, Clancy, please don't tell the joke. But then she'd giggle and, it's everybody made her feel good. And she just had the best time. She saw her daughter being okay, thriving. How did I know you were going to bring me to a brand new life? You didn't tell me because I didn't want one and I didn't want to quit drinking. But I did that day. And I had a kind of a spiritual experience at 31 days. So I know if you're counting days, I get it. I raised my hand for 30 days because I'm here. I raised my hand, whatever. So I raised my hand. I'm not still talking or participating, really. I'm just listening. They put me in front of the fish tank at Culver City because that would keep my attention for a whole meeting. So I raised my hand for 31 days. I pulled it down. I said to myself, oh my God, I have 31 days. I don't stay sober 31 days. And I had that feeling of, light inside that just made me shiver. And that night, Susie and Chuck, because Susie told me the story before she passed away. Susie and Chuck were married, and they took me to where I was staying that night after the meeting, because I'm not driving. And I wrote down an address in West Hollywood, and it was an after-hours place back in a garage, because nobody wanted me that night. And I felt like, well, I'm going to go. I'm just going to go. And so they remember seeing me walk through the headlights of the car back to that garage and what was going on. And they said to each other, she's not going to make it. And that night, I laid on the cot and I heard everybody doing their thing. And I laid there, my backpack was underneath me, and that's my whole life right there. But I had that experience. I had that experience, which let me just hang on. And when the sun came up, I knew I was powerless over alcohol. I saw my unmanageability. I came to believe, and I made a decision to stay. Now, I was going to go out, and God intervened. I really believe that. And I had that feeling just from hours ago. And those kind of feelings when I work with another alcoholic, or I sit in a room and I hear you, and I just hear you with my whole heart, are amazing. I want to get to my dad. It's very important. Thank you. So I got this second sponsor, and she said, well, it's time you made financial amends to your father. And I did not do an inventory of any sort of financial things with her. It was the first sponsor. And I thought, how does she know? And so I called my dad, and he was ready, because he walked me down the aisle at 2.5 years to the B guy. And we were eye to eye, and somebody photo, and he came to a meeting and he stood up and introduced himself and why he was there. And everybody said, hi, Frank. And you took him to the literature table. I thought, oh my God, my dad's a reader. Here we go. And he did. He ran a calculator tape when he read Most Alcoholics Owe Money, and put it in the book there, page 78, I think it is. And so he told my mother too, if she calls, it's circled in red, the total at the bottom. My brother said you had quite a large dossier. I saw it on his desk. And so he comes up with this big number, and I'm calling him to say, Dad, can I pay back the money I owe you? I've got a good job now. And I didn't even realize he was ready, he was ready for me. And I just thought, this is too much. And so I called my sponsor, and she laughed. She said, well, call him back and make payment terms. So we did that. He accepted. And she said, okay, then you're not going to be late. You got to send your dad a check on time every month, because Bill and Bob are watching. Now, I hope that sinks in with some of you, because I'll tell you, I'll go out and I'll think, oh, I don't have to pay for this gas or whatever. Nobody, whatever. Oh, no, Bill and Bob are watching. Okay, so it's in me. But then my dad accepted my payment terms. And she said, are you willing to grow through this with your dad? Because she wanted me to have more with my father than I thought I could ever have. And so she said, put a note about Sharon's life. And I did that for 4 years and 10 months, the best I can figure. And it was easier to go home, and it was easier because my dad had said initially at the events, I just wanted you to be happy. And that was easy to do. I can be happy. I can come home once a year and be happy. I can be happy on the phone. But now it's money time. Now it's consistency. Now it's telling him about my life. Now, my older sister, who is Mensa brilliant millionaire, married another millionaire lawyer, and they're all over the world, and they bring my mom and dad to Paris. They have a great time. And, but my dad got to know me there. I'm going to finish this and tell you that my dad called. It was the day after Christmas. I remember it was Boxing Day, and he said, Merry Christmas, daughter. I didn't get to go home that year. He said, I don't want your money anymore. Merry Christmas. You don't have to send me any more money. It's free and clear. Free and clear, he said. But don't stop sending me your notes. And the innocence came back between me and dad, and my dad got redemption. How does that happen? Direction that comes from somebody who's been there, following a direction, following a path. And yeah, I mean, along the way, it was beautiful. We had the root beer. We got to, sit under a tree on a hot August day and have our root beers. And my legs were swinging like a little 6-year-old girl underneath that picnic table. And we were good. He was killed in 99, and it was over that quick. Accident on his land. Left my mother after almost 58 years. Kissed her goodbye. And he always did when he left, said, you're a hell of a cook. He always gave her a kiss after a meal. And left her life and never came back. And it was a very tough time. But my older sister is now in a boarding care, very nice one, because her husband left her a lot of money. He died of glioblastoma. She had to call a painter to go to hospice to see him because she had no friends in the area. They were all around the world. But and he was protecting her alcoholism. And we found her hoarding and sick and crazy and falling and brain bleeds. And now she has part of her brain, which is atrophied, which is Korsakoff syndrome, a wet brain. This brilliant woman is in a boarding care that's lovely. I mean, they have their own chef. She doesn't want to be there. She calls me like 72 times one day about something. I just have to block her. It's too much. I go to see her. I spend time with her. She's a klepto out of the stores. I have to watch her. She doesn't know, but Pete and I went back to see family in Wisconsin and go to a Packer game. And so we were just there, and the guy that is our friend said, come to the meeting and you're going to split a pitch. So my sister-in-law, who's not an alcoholic, and my brother, who's not an alcoholic, brought my sister. And so they're all there at this AA meeting. She's walking around vacant, but you guys were nice to her. Do you want a cookie? Do you want some coffee? And she would walk up to people vacant, and you just helped her. We help each other. They don't know who it is. Maybe a newcomer can't talk. We don't know. But it was about 2 weeks later that she said to my brother, can we go back to that place where they talk? She felt the language of the heart. And there's really no bringing her back, but yeah, she goes in and out of things, but this is my I'm not enough. I remember I said something to Debbie about my I'm not enough, and you sent me a beautiful letter back. And I'm starting to let that go. I'm not a piece of trash left on the side of the road out of Palm Springs. I am enough. I am enough for God to say, Sharron, go have a life and help others. Clean house, stay humble, constantly say hello to me. My God is my friend. I sponsor a nun, so I made amends to the Catholic Church. I made amends to the carnival because they have a thing there where they have a carnival every year, and so they needed workers. And so I raised my hand, and so I worked that carnival until my son was from kindergarten to 8th grade because he was kicked out of his other kindergarten. So things are repurposed. Pete and I talk about things being repurposed all the time. Him being kicked out, I was the big loser. And then he ended up at a Catholic school where I got to make amends. And at that last day, the big awards day, my son got the award for being the best, largest fundraiser they had ever had at that school. And he got this award, and he said, it's not for me, it's for my mom. And he called me down to the podium. And right now he's mad at me, and he's kind of going through his little whatever, but I was widowed in 2011. I didn't even talk about Casey. It was cancer, and it was hard. And I was alone. And then along comes Pete. I know, sweetie. Thank you. Along comes Pete, and he started stalking my meetings in the pandemic where I was speaking, and I got to hear him. And so for 7 months, we didn't meet, but we talked every day. And we had FaceTime football games because he was a student at University of Chicago, finishing one of his many degrees. And the joy of his many degrees is he got fired from Uber Eats. When he had to make some money, came to me, and we decided it's going to work because we knew each other very well. He got fired from Uber Eats, and then he saw that they need substitute teachers in Los Angeles after the pandemic. It was a scarcity. So he goes to teach first grade. And that degree is an amazing thing that he did, all these things he's done, but he found his spot teaching first grade in an underprivileged school in Los Angeles. So I get to be a witness to that. I get to be a witness to yours. I get to be a witness to many of the joys of Alcoholics Anonymous. Since I didn't talk about Casey, I'm going to end with this story. When he had cancer, and it was melanoma. It wasn't fun. He was a golfer. He couldn't play anymore. We're sitting at the table. And we're trying to have our morning meditation and have our coffee together. And he looks at me and he said, "You see the wind outside?" And I said, "Yeah, it's the Santa Ana's blowing like crazy." And he said, "No." He was quiet. He said, "You see the wind outside?" And I know he was grasshopper sensei, right? I'm trying to, what is he saying to me? Don't see the wind. I don't see the wind. He said, "You don't see the wind with your eyes, right?" I said, "Yeah, I don't see the wind." "But you see the effects of the wind." I said, "Yeah, I see the effects of the wind." And I thought, where are we going with this? But I know it was an important day. And then he said, "I have this cancer that I know is terminal, and I'm not going to be able to be here with you like I want to be here with you. I'm not going to be able to go to Alcoholics Anonymous because I won't be there anymore. I love AA, I love my life, I love golf. It's going to be over. So I don't see God in this cancer." And I'm thinking, what can I say to him? But then he says to me, "But every day I'm still here, I want to have a good day. So when I go out in the world, even though I don't see God, I go out and I look for the effects of God. I see the effects of God everywhere. And I see the effects of God sitting here. Thanks for having me."